All right, so we're a few minutes into 6 o'clock time, so I'm going to get started and first welcome our three panelists here tonight for Women Shifting the Space. This is part of the discussion series, The Creative Use of Difference, which was developed by Indya Childs, who's here with us tonight, and has been a really fun way for us to spend our February Thursday nights. I'll give you guys a little bit of information about the project and about Indya, and then I'm going to turn it over to her and she can let you know more about our panelists tonight. Indya is joining us as a PlySpace resident, and if you're not aware of PlySpace, we are a artist in residence program that is part of the Muncie Arts and Culture Council here in Muncie. And Indya is going to be doing a project with Ball State University. It's a special dance video project that she is choreographing with a group of Ball State students. And the project is going to be drawing from the discussion series that we've been hosting this month to create the choreography and to create kind of the theme for the piece. So it's been really fun to be on this sort of research side of an art making process. And we're really, really thrilled that Indya has shared this process with us. Indya is from Atlanta, Georgia, and she received her BA from dance from Kennesaw State University. Before the pandemic, Indya was living in New York and dancing with the Abby Z and the New Utility. She is currently the director of Peace, Love, and Dance Project organization, which officially launched in September of 2020. So I'm going to pass it on over to Indya now to introduce our panelists tonight. If I might come back in, pop in at the very end to say thank you and welcome you to the next event, which will be next Thursday. So here you go, Indya.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Erin, and thank you so much, PlySpace, for putting this together. I believe that it's so special to have such extraordinary people and having these extraordinary conversations in such uncertain times, but hopeful times. And I think that it's very much so needed, and I'm so thankful to feel supported as an artist during these very uncertain times, and to speak with such important people. So thank you so much, Erin and PlySpace, for putting this together. And thank you for everyone that is joining in. So hello, everyone. My name is Indya Childs, and I am the director of the Peace, Love, and Dance Project. And welcome to our 3 of 4 discussions under the theme of the creative use of difference, presented by PlySpace. Tonight we'll be discussing how women are shifting the space, and I'm so excited to get into this conversation with Ana de Brea and Lauren Pacheco tonight. And I want to give a little intro to each one of these amazing, powerful women. Of course, they have done numerous things, but I'm going to just highlight a couple of things that they have done. Ana de Brea is a professor, practitioner, artist, and critical observer of architecture and design. She is a writer and published author. She is currently a professor at Ball State University. And we have Lauren Pacheco. She's a Mexican-American born and raised on Chicago's Southwest Side. She's a civic practice artist and cultural worker whose work is rooted in space, people, and social impact. She is an associate faculty lecturer and the director of arts programming and engagement at Indiana University Northwest in the School of the Arts. So I'd like to welcome both of you tonight.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. As the moderator, I will be asking questions that go along with the dance film I'll be creating with Ball State University's theater and dance students, entitled Peace, Love, and Dance, which will premiere in the fall. And towards the end of the conversation or the discussion, we will open up the floor to any viewers that would like to ask any questions. And I promise to try to honor the time tonight. Sometimes I get so into it that we don't have enough time for questions. So tonight I would definitely make sure that we have enough time for questions. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce Ana and Lauren.
Good.
Thank you so much for being here. I do want to jump right into things, because I do want to make sure we have time at the end for questions from the viewers. But before we get started, would you all like to share anything about yourselves or give any details about your work before we kind of get into the meat of everything?
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, I'm happy to jump right into the questions. I'm really excited about the conversation, just because I recently moved from Chicago to about 4 years ago to Gary, Indiana, and so I've sort of found my practice changing a bit given the landscape and the demographics, and so it's these questions and the conversation tonight. I'm looking forward to chatting in a safe space.
Yes.
Me too, same. Yeah, I prefer to, yeah.
Okay, I love it. Let's get into it. Right now, the section that I'm working on with the Ball State students is the love section. And in this section, we are really highlighting what identity means and how it's so important to self-identify. Because I believe that it's important to self-identify because you don't allow the world to tell you who you are. You tell the world who you are. And that means embracing all sides of your identity, which means your race, your gender, your sex, your first language, your age, national origin, social economic status, and on and on. The creative use of difference, this comes from Audre Lorde, who is heavily influencing the work. And she self-identifies as a Black lesbian poet, mother, warrior, and more. So my first question to both of you is, how do you self-identify, and what part of your identity do you feel has the greatest effect on how others perceive you? And this is a conversation, so you can all interject when you want to. Yes. So anyone can.
Should I?
No, you go.
Go. Well, that's when you send me a little bit of the topics we will be discussing. Identity is a big subject for me at this moment. Currently, I'm working on my second book in the English language. I say that because I'm very proud of that, of being able of writing in English, because it's a challenge by itself to me. But the question of identity that I already discussed in my most recent publication also, because to me, I never felt the need to say that I was a Latino person, right? So I think it was embedded, right? I thought of that. But being here, when I started traveling, I think as I was referring to you earlier, I worked for long years, more than 15 years in Argentina for two different newspapers at different moments, right? But for long years in each of those newspapers, I started traveling, right? And I speak more than one language, so that gave me the opportunity to travel and to visit different parts of the world. And to me, that was really interesting, motivated me, so how you feel belonging to different parts, even when you are, maybe you don't even speak the same language, but you feel that idea of belonging, right? So we all humans tend to camouflage to to the environment, and not just visually, right? So, but also through touch, through all the senses. So to me was a huge, essentially, I taught in Argentina, but then later, after 15 years there, I moved to Germany, and I was there for a year in Frankfurt. And I was, really feeling responsible, about that, what I should, right? What I am bringing here to this different environment. And so for me, the notion of identity, and more today, right? Currently, that we are, right? So we can design something from the architecture point of view in a different part of the world that maybe we never visited, or right, we call friends in Facebook or in these digital agoras to people that we never met, maybe, you know, or so what is that, right? So what is really, and so you start confronting the idea of geography, right? So many times, you know, I joke, but many times, you know, I am invited to go to dinner, or not during this COVID situation, but before, and it was always to Mexican restaurants. And I was saying, hey, I'm from Argentina. So Mexican is part of the Latin world, but it's a totally different hemisphere, right? So so I have been, you know, contacting different people, artists, you know, so of course architects, and asking those questions, you know, what is identity today in today's society, what that means, and what we are responsible for. So I think that is, I don't have really, because of my background, I am also Italian, Argentinian Italian. So I don't even have the physically, you know, or at least what I see, you know, that is the common uh, iconography of a Latino, right? So that is, to me, is still a question. I don't have definitions. I like the idea of discussing about that, you know, what means, you know, identity, and the closest point to me is honesty, you know, this idea of being what it is, right? What is in front of you, and what you see, right? And how people perceive you, because maybe what you see of yourself is not the same as what people see. And I like this idea. Some people, I grew up in Buenos Aires, and as I said, I travel a lot internationally, and coming to Muncie, for example, that is totally the other side of the Buenos Aires, if you could say that, made me, you know, contrast, you know, some aspects of that, you know, what is identity, you know, what is, some people say, what are you doing here in Muncie, being from Buenos Aires, right? That is totally different. But that is, I like that challenge, you know, to move and to start questioning, and to start seeing also the reactions, you know, of people, right? So because sometimes we see differences that are very obvious, right? And I like to see those more subtle differences, that I think that we are humans, right? So I like more the idea of relating to identity to actions, right? Instead of adjectivizing, you know, what one person is, right? So because if not, it's this, you take already, you know, what you assume it is, and like inviting me to a Mexican restaurant, right? So is because what you know, and some people, for example, you know, to define myself when I need to fill a form for, you know, to get a passport or something more formal, I don't find myself that there. You know, I was saying this more, you know, earlier in a meeting, I'm not Hispanic. I speak Spanish, but it's not, you know, so, and sometimes you don't find the Latin, right, word there that will be the closest. So to me, it's still a question, and I like you know, to discuss about that, but I try to not show the stereotype, right? So I question and I confront those stereotypes, and I just sometimes I do it, you know, on purpose. You know, follow, you know, I think I don't like the drawers, right? So when someone calls me Latin, I want to know what is that? What does it mean? Why you say that, right? Or why you define that myself in that way? So, well, I think to start was long enough, right?
That's beautiful.
I think
I don't
yeah,
want to actually the whole all the time. But I think I appreciate, this invitation because I like that, I like to discuss that, right? So to me, then I would say, I'm questioning that, and the notion of honesty, what it is, or why you say it, or why you need that definition. Is that definition necessary, right? What the definition says, right? That is important, right? So to me, what is if it implies a difference, why the difference is important, right? Well,
I do want to give a chance to Lauren to respond to this too, but Lauren,
yeah,
yes, go ahead.
yeah, no, I think Anna brings up a really good point about geography because, I am a native Chicagoan, born and raised on the southwest side of the city. And as any true and honest Chicagoan, we differentiate ourselves by a different sort of set of characteristics, right? So I am from the south side. I'm not from the north side. I'm not from the west side. I'm a Bears fan. I'm a Sox fan. I'm not a Cubs fan, right? And so we take great pride in those unique sort of identifiers, right? Especially because I am, an urban inner city kid, right, who attended public school system and traveled frequently on buses and trains, right? And so that helps to sort of create an additional set of identities for the way that I think and see and practice. But I can't deny my physical characteristics, right, which define my identity as well and how I'm perceived in the world, right? I am brown and I have, sort of traditional Mexican facial characteristics. And so those are things that I can't deny. So there isn't sort of an openness to my identity or this idea of passing, right? I can't necessarily pass for a European, right? I can't pass for a white woman. So I know this every day. There's something I can't change. I think, ancestry DNA kind of really mind F's people, because when you start to see sort of what what the biology makeup is, I think I'm like 56% indigenous Mexican, and then like 20% Spanish, and then 15% Portuguese, right? And so before, I was just a Chicagoan from the South Side. I only support the Sox, and I'm Mexican. Mexican American, third generation Mexican American. So now we're adding all of these other sort of elements to it, right? Which I think opens up different conversations for just me, psychologically, and looking at my practice and the way in which my family has sort of interacted with one another and the way that we look different, right? And so I think it's, it's pretty compelling data for like the average person and citizen to sort of see these numbers. But I am indigenous, and so I indigenous Chicago and indigenous Midwestern, right? And so it's just this really interesting sort of conversation. But it wasn't until I was in high school where I really had to I was confronted with self-identifying as a Hispanic, as a Latina, as a Latino, as a Mexican, right? Because it wasn't really part of the conversation in our household, right? Where we were, it wasn't something that was so tattooed on us, right? We grew up around, very diverse people. I have very, diverse family members. And so it wasn't until, you sort of elevate and step into, adulthood where you're sort of confronted by like identity. Where am I? What tribe am I a part of, right? Where do I belong? How do I belong? Am I going to look like this? And is this going to get me into doors? I also have a very non-traditional Mexican name, right? My name is Lauren and last name Pacheco. So if I was like, Ana Guzman, right? People would already start to construct some preconceived idea of who I am and what I look like. And I don't have an accent. And so when it's funny when, I'm talking to people on the phone and then they see me, they're like, whoa, she doesn't match. Something is not here, right here. So, again, I can't deny my physical characteristics. Things are, identity, notions, and conversations are constantly evolving and changing. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that, I think from doing the research that I've been working on, I think it's to label someone, I think it gives the other person a sense of security, because I feel like I know who you are without having to understand how complex you are. And so it's easy. This group is this group is that, and this group is this, and this is how they behave, this is how this person behaves, this is how this group behaves. Because I think that it takes so much work to understand that we are all so complex, that we intersect in so many different categories and different cultures, that it's hard to really say, okay, you are this, and limit yourself to that box. So I think that it's interesting to hear you all speak on that, because I'm finding that within myself that I'm finding like things I want to understand more so about who I am and my identity and how I identify, because of that complexity. Because it's easy to put myself in a box too, because then I can say, okay, well, I do this, but I also do this. You know what I mean? So I think that, I love how there's complexity there. So my next question, I think that comes up is that I personally feel that when people see someone, and this is my opinion, they see their race and they see their sex. They see that, okay, are you Black? Are you white? Are you Asian? Or are you a woman? Are you a man? So I think that's like the first things that come up. And so I do want to talk about race a little bit. And I found this article, and it said, and it's funny because I've heard this before, and I wanted to bring it up, but in an article from USA Today, it says that in the 1960s, the saying was, if you're white, you're all right. If you're Black, stay back. If you're brown, stick around.
Or get out of town. Or get out of town.
Or get up. Or get out of town.
Hey,
I didn't know.
Yeah, and I've heard this before, unfortunately, as a kid. And in this article in particular, it breaks down the idea that in this country, that Latinos would be accepted as full participants in society if you just wait for your moment. And I think that, and that even with just that being on race, that hasn't even touched on sex and gender. So it's like we have to get past the race before we get to that moment. So my question is, what is the why behind your work as women of color, and how are you shifting the space and shifting the ideas of what was stated, especially with these kind of ideas in mind? Because I feel like, again, laws have changed, but I think people's attitudes on certain things hasn't, in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your point. Your point about the article. We're intellectual beings, right? And the way in which our brains work, we compartmentalize, we sort, we order, we break things into lists, right? There's all of the things that we do to function, right? And to have some sort of normalcy, whatever that means, how we get up in the morning and go through our day. And then, sort of the next sort of phases is, the ways in which we are challenging, these sort of ideas, these, the notions, the stereotypes, the discriminatory sort of ideas and thinking, right? And so, it's, meeting people for the first time and developing a running list of who they are. You're already, drafting a list of who these people are. I think it's just part of human nature, right? Now, when we start to be just really nasty towards people and ignorant, right, that's sort of a different type of, conversation where the brain has sort of, moved into that's a bit more emotional. But, the why behind my work, is because I can. and because I feel in my gut, and in my mind and in my heart, that I have to. And I can is because I can do the work that I am currently doing, is because I'm able to recognize, even as a person of color, a brown woman, if from a working class family, I can also recognize the privilege that I have experienced, right? That I'm a college educated woman, right? And that I have a job, right? And then I can work in the arts, and I want to be able to create programming and interact with people to sort of reflect and think about and build cultural value, right? So I find myself to be incredibly humbled and privileged to do what I do. But it's also thinking about the great inequities that exist across Chicago and across many of our communities, and the injustices, right? And the fact that I'm in 42 years old, and in my community there still isn't an art center, right? And so we would travel on buses an hour, 2 hours out of our community to enjoy arts programming, right? Go to a theater, right? And so when you think about the democratization of the creative practices and amenities in our communities, that impacts you as a child, right? You remember that as a young person, right? That you couldn't just walk 2 or 3 blocks to get some Thai food, or you couldn't just walk 2 or 3 blocks to the local theater, right? And so these are challenges that you sort of recognize, like something's not right in my community, right? But in 3 communities away, right, they have a plethora, a menu of amenities, right? And so is it a conversation about a value system? Is it a conversation about political agendas, lack of funding, or is it a conversation or question about the realities of Black, brown, and white communities, right? And so throughout my sort of professional experiences, I've been able to sort of develop a strategy and fine-tune ways in which I can help to address those sort of questions and some of those inequities that I experience, and try to make things right, right? And I think that takes me to this idea of what my role is in terms of shifting the space as a convener, someone who's uplifting others by creating new platforms, new narratives for engagement. What does that mean, right? Bringing new resources to communities, exploring boundaries and collaborations and interactions in a way that maybe if I was so tribal and so like, I am Mexican, I only want to support my own folks, right? Having a very narrow lens of the way in which I should work because I'm a part of this group, it's just incredibly limiting, and it's just not fun, right? I mean, at the end of the day for me. Yeah, what do you think, Anna? What's your why?
Yeah, I think that is the last point, is very limiting. I find that very interesting. Is when you define yourself that way, it's like already, okay, it's fine, it's done, right? So it's very, it's against freedom, right? So I am different in a group of people with my, I'm different from my brother, right? And we have the same blood, and we are different, very different. And so to me, to put things in that, just to make differences, that way is very simple. So I think that my way, my work is, I don't know if it's exactly the why, but I think that is a good point, is that my work tends to see first, principles, right? So I do certain projects and I do not do others. So that selection of projects is, or work or things. So for example, it's very difficult for me to understand women in architecture, right? What that means really. I want to, to know. I couldn't be comfortable talking just about that, because to me, I don't see the difference, right? So I don't see, recently I was in a webinar that it was, the difference was black and white. You know, I have one of my best friends, she's blind. And so I never hear her talking about that difference. And I have learned a lot from her, how she feels space, right? So how she uses other senses, you know, how she, in a very, like a Broadway avenue in Buenos Aires, and she can hear, you know, the birds singing. And that to me is amazing, you know. And we are similar, we have the same roots, we are both from Buenos Aires, right? We have similar, right, characteristics in terms of family, so how we grew up, and and she could tell, you know, teach me a lot. About using other senses that I wasn't really paying attention to. Uh, I think that the most important scenario when you put things in drawers is that you limit yourself. You know, you are, and you assume things, right? So you assume, you know, those differences. I believe it's important to differentiate, right? So, but not to segregate, you know, by that difference. So to me, I always use kind of mantra that I say no labels. I use it as a hashtag, and I use it in many of my lectures or my classes. And because it's that. And you can go, you know, and some people also talk to me about that and question the no labels thing and say, you can go very far. Yes, I want to, right? I want to communicate. I'm not sure that I will change the entire world, but I think that my why is to change a little bit, right? Or to put, you know, a notion there in my classes, or right, or something there that will make people think about those differences and what is really a difference.
Yeah, I think I want to just add one point before I go to the next question. I think that's interesting that you both are speaking on this, because I think that I never thought about it narrowing like you and putting yourself in this kind of narrow lens, because I think that I know for myself I have a challenge with this, because I feel like, especially being a Black woman, that um, it's, how can I put this? It's that um, people, I think, already know what I'm going to say before I say it, which I think is, in a sense, where it's that if there's a Black issue, it's like, here's a microphone, I know you have something to say. You know what I mean? And I think that sometimes it's scary, because it's like you have a hard time saying what you really want to say, because if you say something, it may go against America. And you say something else, it may go against, it may feel like you're going against your own people. You know what I mean? So I think that it's hard, I think, sometimes to really put things or try to live in both worlds in America, and have an American point of view, and be me in my situation, and be Black, because I think that things align in a very particular way, and I think that it's hard to show how they intersect, and especially with what's happened in the previous year, that it's, again, it's like it's almost like you have to censor what you say, because if it doesn't align with what the American dream is, it doesn't align with what the Black community is saying. I think that backlash can happen from both people. So I think that, for me, I love the idea of no labels, but I think that it's hard to really achieve that in my point of view, because there is such that is such a main focus in society, is where do you stand, and who are you? Are you with this people? Are you with them? Like, and it's very hard to say I'm with everyone. I think that's something that is still, that's why I think that what I love about Audre Lorde is that she's really saying that we must understand that everyone is different. You know, everyone is different, and that we all intersect in some sense, and we must use our differences to creatively propel each other and elevate the community, as opposed to labeling and saying, okay, you are this, and therefore you can only do this, or this, you can do that. And I think it even comes to gender and sex and religion, and so that I think that my dream is to live in this promised land idea where we can all live without labels. But unfortunately, I think that's such a big thing in society, because people need to
Well,
know, right? Who are you?
yes, but
Yeah.
I don't take it. I know, you know, we live in this world. Unfortunately, we,
Yeah.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
but the no label to me is kind of utopian concept, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
but, you know, and we know that we will never, unfortunately, we will never
I
get
hope so.
there.
I'm like,
But
yes.
that I
Yeah.
think that is the meaning of utopia, right?
Mm-hmm.
To allow you to walk, and in that walk, you know, towards that objective, uh, you start, you know, congregating, you start discussing, you start. To me, it serves that way. To me, utopia allows you to walk, you know,
Sure.
to exchange, you know, ideas
Mm-hmm.
and concepts, and to start the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
right?
And I agree, and I agree in the no labels concept in principle. You know, I think many people in principle would agree with that, and I think there are some really sort of labels out there that have just been really weaponized, right? And really prevents folks from kind of thinking and sharing and discussing and having discourse to sort of sort it out and intellectually sort of make sense of it, because folks are just fearful, right? Of losing their jobs, right? Of losing families and friends and, you know, their circle. And so I think, you know, we live at a time where reality and illusion are constantly working together, and it's hard to, and it's confusing, and it's really hard to sort of talk things through or think things through, is because we don't have enough details, right, in order to make a decision or a choice, an intellectual decision or a choice, or because of all of the civil unrest and these things that are bubbling up and bothering people, you know, that are really important, and these are conversations that we're having. It makes us where we are emotional beings, but, you know, maybe over and hyper emotional, right? Where we're not given the space to sort of calm down and be slow and sort of pay attention in a different way. And I think because of that, when reality and illusion are working together, and it becomes confusing, is that it prevents us from being honest and finding honesty in others, and finding and seeking out the truth, and from sharing with others, right? And then our egos come into play and start to interact in really sort of weird ways. But I do think, you know, labels, this idea of labels, this concept of labels, I think that's what makes us, in some ways, as humans, unique and, you know, uniquely peculiar, right? I'm uniquely different from Indya and Anna, and, you know, the other, you know, 21 folks on the call. You know, I have particular labels that I really do embrace, right? As an art administrator, as a cultural worker, as a Chicagoan. These are things that make me feel special and have pride and feel proud, and that I do have tribes, right? And I can sort of navigate and float within different groups. And there's great diversity and sort of multiculturalism, which is really quite beautiful, and you start to learn about others. But, you know, I think these conversations and moments and ideas are just, you know, just really heightened and weaponized in such a way where we can't have the conversations that we need to have. And so I feel your frustration, Indya, and Anna. I in principle, I do believe in it, of course, you know, and this sort of utopia. But the reality is that, you know, you could, you know, watch on the news of the shootings that are happening in primarily Black and Brown communities in Chicago. I live in a city that's losing population every day, because primarily Black population, because folks can't find jobs, right? So the terrible educational system. There's all these realities that exist, right? And it's painful and it's traumatic, and we have a lot of healing to do. You know, probably won't happen in my lifetime, but I think the work I'm doing now might help to contribute to for a new generation. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that I love this conversation, and I really want to talk to you for hours. So I think that yeah, that's what keeps me waking up and every day, is the hope that what even if it seems very small, is going to change something, and make this world a little bit better than before. So I think that's kind of like what is my motivations. I hope that just one person can understand
Mm-hmm.
what's happening, and if
That's
they're
right.
doing, and then that will spark another person, and I think it will
Mm-hmm.
start to develop into a new way of thinking. And I think that's what it is right now. It's a re-education of what we think that we know, and being able to have an open mind to say, hey, maybe this isn't the right side of history I want to be on. I need to change my way of thinking. But I do want to, because I know we're running out of time. I love talking to you all. But and I have some more questions, but I want to skip over some because I want to
Mm-hmm.
still get to things. But so to get to, so that was just, again, with that was just talking about race. So we haven't even gotten to being a woman.
Mm.
um, I was reading another article, and Joanne Grossman, she's a legal scholar at Southern Methodist University, and she describes the workforce as a pyramid shape for women, in which there is equal representation at the bottom, and then it drops off at every meaningful level. So my question is, in both of y'all's opinions, what do you feel needs to be done to provide more opportunities for women, to hold higher positions of power, like dismantling the system and traditions that inhibit women's advancement?
Mm-hmm.
Start with
Yeah.
this time.
Mhm. You say Lauren, right? Or me? I don't
Oh,
know.
Anna. Yes,
Anna.
you.
Okay, I couldn't hear. Thank
Sorry.
you. No, I'm, wow, being a woman. So from there we start, right? So I think that also, you know, the idea of, I don't want to, sometimes I am not sure if I explain what I want to say clearly. You know, the notion of, you know, putting the no labels as utopia, again, is about walking to me, you know, and it's about, and I believe that, of course, uh, in a different way and not related to the stereotype, I think that we all have a power. We all have power. So we give the power to others, right? Those that have power, you know? So in the immediate, right, relation, we all have power, right? You know, I am in front of students, right? I'm grading them, could be seen, you know, that way. So to me, you know, one of the most interesting projects, and I would say at least, you know, the most um, sensitive for me is, you know, I had, you know, a tumor 12 years ago, and I had to go to the hospital for very strong therapies. And every time, and I could go by myself, I could drive, right? Thank God it wasn't, you know, that, but it was really difficult, at least for me. And every time I parked my car, I saw you know, a sign saying for cancer patients only. Cancer was this big, patient was this big. I couldn't understand it because, you know, you go generally by color, right? So if you have the red one, you know, you park here. If you have the yellow, so it was, the idea was, you know, there was physicians and patients. So, and that was destroying me more than chemo, you know, just because I wasn't, you know, I was able to drive by myself and doing, you know, this whole, you know, the whole therapy by myself. But every time I parked my car, I was thinking of the other people, you know, the ones that were, you know, very close to, you know, to disappear from this world. And you know, I talked to my doctors. One day, you know, I went, there was, you know, I asked for a meeting. I talked to my doctors, and they didn't even realize it, you know. They thought, oh, this is great that you are bringing this point. And they change everything. They put color in the parking, right? Now they give you a color card, you know, where you can park. Because I was saying, what happens with that person, right? that knows, and you every day, you know, you are reminding them that they are sick, right? It's like, okay, you are Black, park here, you know, you are sick, right? You know, so it's the same thing. So to me, I have done buildings, a lot of buildings I put up, and I wrote books in different languages if you want. But to me, that project was very significant when the doctors order, you know, to change that. And I said, this is, I don't even know if people know that I was the one that created, but I thought that that could help people, at least those people that were, you know, for a little while, you know, going through that, you know, that type of therapy that is already, and you know, the doctors are fabulous, and they were thanking me in so many ways, you know, and they said, you know, yes, you're right, you know, that's the wrong thing. And you never know, it was a waste of money, of course, right? Everything you could say, right? So I think that those small, right, changes make the big change, right? So maybe I will not see it. You are a lot younger than me. But to me, the summatory of all these small approaches is a bad thing to say, you know, good things about ourselves. But to me, that makes me feel happy. That's my why, right? That you were asking me. That very small thing, right? So helping people even without saying it. And there wasn't any need of money to do that, right? It was just an observation. And I think that that's, to me, I consider that very important.
And I think that before Lauren responds to that is interesting, because I think that, just a quick note, I think that the lack of representation, I think, can lead to a space for ignorance. I think where people problem, for example, when you said that no one was there to properly say how they felt about that, people didn't know, because I think that there was a lack of people that represent that. So I think when it goes to how certain things are showcased in the media and things like that, I think it is because there's a lack of representation of people of color, or people that experience certain things. And that's why there is that ignorance level there, because and I mean, say, hey, this is not right. You know, this is not okay. So Lauren, what would you have to say about why there's not enough women in power positions, or what can we do to dismantle things to help?
Yeah, that's a tough one, right? and that's a tough question. But I'm thinking of three things. One is an intentional stopping, eliminating, normalizing gendered practices and behaviors. And, you know, by that I mean is, you know, in our families, in our schools, in our communities, you know, having very early, you know, moments, experiences, interventions with boys and girls and everyone else in our world, to explore, you know, trades in different types of educational moments, right? Or ways to, you know, just be. What are the ways and things that we need as humans in order to be self-sufficient, right? You are driving in a car, you get a flat, you need to be able to fix the flat. Doesn't matter if you're a girl or a boy, you should have the basic understanding of how to fix a flat, right? I grew up going to a summer cottage in Wisconsin, and you know, I have some, you know, uncles who are like, girls don't ride dirt bikes, but my father bought a dirt bike for us to occupy our time, and so I learned how to ride a dirt bike. I learned how to fish. I learned how to climb trees. We used BB guns and shot each other as kids. It was great fun for city kids, you know, and I think people will naturally just sort of self-select and sort of gravitate towards things, right? So if girls and boys and others are kind of like, I'm not really feeling, you know, being in the kitchen. I'm not really feeling, you know, fixing, you know, changing the oil on my car. And I'm going to go find a subject matter expert to handle that, right? But at least having some sort of awareness and understanding of how to sort of function and do things, or how to have conversations about it, really opens up the space and the platform for you know, gender to just be eliminated from these types of conversations. The other thing is, I always say this concept when I'm, you know, on boards or I'm on jury committees for foundations is is to share the chair concept. And by that I mean, I'm not asking for someone to appoint me as a commissioner or to put me on a board, right? Because I'm very busy and I choose my time carefully. But I think that if there is a woman or someone who I sort of have a friendship with, or folks that agree and believe in my practice and my work, that there's an opportunity where I can be at the table, right? In an interesting way as a guest, right? As a subject matter expert, right? As a citizen, as an artist. And so I think that, it's really hard to sort of give up power. But I think that there's great benefit in sharing the chair and bringing other people to the table, right? And the sort of the last sort of, food for thought is, I am also very frustrated around this idea of what my husband calls urban interpreters. And by that, I mean, there are a number of sort of foundations out there that will go to the one or two specific Latinos or the one Black woman, right? Or that one person. And they are like everywhere. They're like on every committee, they get all the money. And I'm like, yo, they don't really represent me. They're not my voice. I'm not giving and it's not only for sort of Black brown sort of moments, but it's also for gender, right? And so we're all again uniquely different and uniquely peculiar, and so we really need to like stop that and just know that because I'm a Mexican, I don't represent all Mexicans. Because you're African American, you don't speak on behalf of everyone, right? And because you are other, you check that other box, right? And so I think that's really important for institutions and businesses and in our own practices in life, is to just be very conscious of that, right? And because I think it's lazy, and I think it's inconsiderate, and I don't think it's helping anyone. It's holding us all back, and it's something that just is happens way too much, and it's utterly frustrating. Yeah. So that's all I have. I have those three things.
That's you all are both. So I'm like, I'm taking so many notes. I do want to open up the floor to anybody to ask any questions. You can drop them now in the Q&A box or in the chat box. We can see both, and feel free to ask me anything that you like to that we kind of been discussing already. And yes, because we have about 5 minutes left. Let's see. Someone says, "Oh,
okay, let's give this read."
Okay, it says, "Is the need to label ourselves a product of our individualistic society in which everyone must define themselves as special and defined and different from each other?" Individualistic. I can't say that.
I wouldn't be able to.
Is the need to label ourselves a product of our individualistic society in which everyone must define themselves as special and different from others?
Yes, probably. That's again, right? So, yeah, society is defining, and more and more. On one side, we have the opportunity today to have friends that we don't even know who they are, if they are Black or if they are, white or Latin or whatever. And I think it's our society on the other side makes us to feel, to demands our individuality, right? So that's why I think that the conversation, of course, is always welcome. Of course, is the first, possibility we have. But if we do not add a small action to that, it doesn't make sense. That's why I think that action is, I also say architecture is a verb, right? So I try not to define architecture, good architecture, bad architecture. It is architecture or it's not, right? And to me, we are humans, or we demonstrate that we are not, right? So to me, it's simple. Simplicity is the most difficult complexity, right? But it's about putting ourselves in the shoes of the other person. That's my religion. If I have to say my religion, that one, right? To feel, right? How to put ourselves in the shoes of others.
Yeah, we are. I don't think it's bad for us to be self-interested, right? And to present our self-interest and our personal agenda to our conversations and to our relationships and collaborations, right? These are the things that I'm trying to accomplish, right? And if we work together, right, some these things will be satisfied on my end, and then I will be able to provide a service and resources, and we'll, have a new experience together. So sort of on the individual, I think we do feel special when we can think or project that we are, having this sort of this new thought, right? And this new experience, right? And I think that's can be really quite beautiful, especially for artists who I think are incredibly individualistic and driven by ego, and that's very important to the practice, right? But I think that there are some labels that are necessary, right? Like I am a diabetic, and that is very important for me, because in certain environments I need to be very conscious of that, right? Or if you are a carnivore, or if you're a vegan, right? But I think so. There's a categorization, right? There's a hierarchy, that and the hierarchy is a bad word, because Latin hierarchy, that conjures up whole other types of conversations, but they exist for a reason. But some of these more sort of triggered, weaponized labels, it just again sort of creates confusion and anger in a really weird way, because I think in some ways we are humans, and we need to communicate, but sometimes we don't communicate, if that makes sense, right? We watch for cues and behaviors, and we hold things back because of weird fears and stuff. But I mean, well, what are we gonna do? We're puzzling it out.
Okay, one more question. It says, how has your perspective on self-identity and power shifted as you have gotten older?
Well, that is the question for me. I am the only one that is old here.
No.
I have a filter on my camera here.
Tell me where you bought it. So I think that getting older was one of the most. On one side, is not you regret to not be young anymore, but on the other side, it gives you the notion of that power that I was mentioning, right? The power that we have, of acting, doing something. So when you are young, because of different situations, probably, we are more afraid of, right, of being who we are, right? And we are more careful. But when you get older and you are, settled, I think it's gives you that notion, at least from my experience. I think that allows me to see things clearly, to differentiate, what is where quality is, right? So to see, I am very now very interested in the notion of energy, what that means, and I think it relates to that also. It's like you are saving, right, and you are taking notes your entire life until there is a moment. I don't know when that is, but you are, you have clarity in some things, not many, but some, and you have the power to say, okay, how I act, right? So I like the idea of less copyright, more art, right? So less individualism, right? And more, community, more sharing, right? So I like that that idea, right? That when you get older, in a regular scenario, right? Because we tend to do things for the average, right? We are all wearing masks, and they are all solid masks. Now, people with hearing problems that need to read lips, they don't have that because no one is paying attention, and they could be black, could be yellow, could be, and they are already discriminated from the group of the entire group, right? So and to me, that is very, I'm doing some sketches and, put some sketches in Instagram and all that, because I want people to start the conversation, right? So no one thinks of that, right? No one thinks of, people with that disability, right? And we are putting those people already out of the, right? Of the group, of the world, right? So the entire world is putting aside how many? 3 million people in the world, 4 million, 1,000 million, I don't know. But even if we put aside one, that's enough. So I know that nothing will change one day to another, right? It takes time to learn. It's not easy. But I think it's important to start the conversation and to say, hey, we are designing for the average. How many times, right? We thought of this, we just wear the mask, or, we just say social distance, right? Wash your hands. There are people in Africa that do not have water. There are people in Argentina, in the north of Argentina, that they cannot wash their hands. So the responses are also for the average. So to me, that is what gives me, the getting older, that to think more about the others. And it sounds very religious, right? Very, oh, no. That's important. It's really important, because we are, we don't have that problem, right? The good thing of the COVID is that it happens to everybody in the world. It's still democratic, because it's not the same for people that have insurance, have access to water, but it happens to all over the world. So I think that is in us, right? In telling people, and these people in Africa didn't have water before the COVID, right?
Yeah, and I would say, just to add very quickly, getting older suggests that you've had many life experiences where you've tested, you've prototyped, you've experimented, you've taken a certain set of risks, so that you have built this sort of greater awareness, right, of maybe how things work, right, the sort of the mechanics, right, how things function, how you function, right, you sort of dug your feet in and sort of grounded yourself in a different way. And I think as I've gotten older, I've begun to think about my longevity as a human, right? And that all of our time is limited, right? And thinking about legacy, right? And thinking about impression making, right? Memory making, history making. And that, in those conversations, have driven this sort of new sense of power that I have in my life experiences, right, and what I've read and learned and what I've experienced. So it just makes me much more sort of aware and conscious. But then I also recognize, that I follow the Solowinskian methodology of community organizing, right? Not all of his sort of philosophy, but most of it around base building, right, and building base and building communities and creating agendas, and how do you move agendas, right? It's people, power, and money, right? If you begin to recognize what institutions really look at that as a framework, right, and then what I've been able to do is, as a brown woman, right, which is very unique working in my field. I use that, in some ways I weaponize it as well, right, to sort of, build momentum, build curiosity. So I've been able to sort of think in a more strategic way about the ways in which power can be constructed or manipulated, right? But I would hope that, I spent my 20s and my early 30s just taking risks and experimenting and just, testing things out. And so now I feel like, okay, I've done that, right? I still take risks, right? And I still like operate on the fly, which is just so incredibly exciting and, intrinsic to who I am. But, I've learned some lessons. I've had enough failures to know that I'm not going to do that again.
Okay, we have one last question, and
Yeah.
then we're going to wrap it up.
Yep.
At what point is the desire to define each identity so polarized and that it is impossible to make progressive change?
Wow. What do you think, Indya?
I don't know. I think for me, quite frankly, recently I had an identity crisis where I didn't really know who I was because I was taught to, in order to survive, I kind of had to whitewash who I was, especially because I was in the ballet world. So I didn't bring issues that or really dive into my identity because I felt like it was inappropriate to do so. So I think I'm in the part or I'm in the beginning of just kind of understanding that I can speak out loud about who I am. So I think that I'm in the moment now where I'm really investigating who I am and really being okay to say this is who I am out loud. So I think I'm not to the point where I have gotten to the point where I'm kind of limiting myself because I think that unfortunately I'm at the very beginning of understanding who I am because I felt like I didn't get that chance as you're saying at a younger age to really explore what that meant because I felt like I had to fit into a mold that was acceptable. So I think that I can see how it could become so when someone becomes so I think driven into that one way or digging into that how it could limit growth in a sense because it does narrow out or doesn't really give room for other things to influence your identity and other things to explore other aspects of it. I could see how that could can kind of stop you in a sense, but I think it's important to know who you are. I think it is important to explore all of your identities and explore every aspect of you. And I think that again, unfortunately, I'm at the point where I'm still because people always say leave what you have, or as an artist, leave your drama or leave yourself at the door and just come in and move and just dance. And I'm like, I never really had a chance to bring who I am outside and bring that inside the studio. So I'm still trying to figure out who I am in that sense, and what does it mean to be Black in my mind, my world? What does it mean to be? What does it mean to praise the way I praise? My spiritual practice, like what does all that mean? And I think that's where I am. And so I haven't. I'm in the kind of fun stage where I want to see everything about me because I feel like I didn't really have the opportunity to do so growing up, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I would just say, I don't know if I'm going to answer the question, but I would say that in moving forward, right, moving the conversations forward, moving the human race forward, I think it's important for all of us to kind of check the acceptance police, like check those individuals, those people who continue to shut down the important conversations that we need to have, right, about race and gender and sex and, socioeconomic and every sort of, area of our life that surrounds us, right? We're part of a system, right? And so, I think it's really important to sort of say, you are not going to create the parameters for the way how I'm going to live, right? I'm an intellectual person. I'm going to reason and rationalize things, right? And I'm going to be in a space where I can have the necessary conversation so that we as a human race can move away from just the labels and just the definitions and explore what that could look like. And, I would argue that the creative practices and the creative industries is the perfect vehicle, right, for moving us away from just those, those labels and definitions and having a different type of conversation. But I do think it's important for us to sort of call, folks out who are just, creating, a really violent and uncomfortable environment, because you're trying to talk things through, and however ignorant it may be, there's levels, right? But if you're unable to have the space where you can get it out and hear and listen without feeling attacked, right? We need to be able to shut that down. And then it moves to a different level. And then that's a different conversation that is going to bring about different behaviors and reactions, right? But at first, we have to talk about it. We have to have those conversations.
And all the time. And all the time.
Yeah.
Because that's something, when you, India, were saying that that you are in the process of investigating who you are, I think that process never stops. You're going, there is, we talk about new normality. There wasn't a normal, and there isn't any new normal, because normal doesn't exist. There is change, and every time more change. So I think the discourse is very important. When you start talking, when people talk to me about new normality, I said, what do you mean by that? Right? So you are assuming that there was a normal time, and I don't think there was, right? So maybe because I am interested in modern, right? And tolerance and all that. So I don't think that, to me, change is and to have this notion of that we are women, that we are different, that we are individual difference, and to make, we have to make the effort, not wait for the others to make it, right? So we need to say, okay, this is bothering me for some reason, right? And we are certain about what we are. It is not just, it's something serious. So make it, right? Act. Sometimes you can change it. Sometimes, will take more time. Sometimes you will not be able to change it. But at least the action of acting. I always remember my mother when I was very young, very, very young. My mother was from Italy, and my grandparents, her parents, of course, were from Italy. So, and they never spoke Spanish. So we needed to learn Italian to be able to communicate, right? My mother didn't send her parents to learn Spanish to be able to communicate to us, right? So we needed to make the effort, and for different reasons. So I think that effort is necessary. Again, the action, right? The discourse, So don't buy the new normality just because it's on the newspaper. So no. So question. No, there is no normality. It doesn't exist, right? If we believe in change, and we all understand that change happens. So that's why I say you will keep investigating who you are. Life surprised me in many different moments in my life when I thought, wow, this is right. So, that is, no, look at me, I'm here in Muncie. I couldn't find it in the map when I was invited to come as a visiting scholar. I said, what is that, Muncie? I was expecting, to see the profile of a city, I was coming from Frankfurt, that is very cosmopolitan, right? And so a metropolis, and so look at me, and I'm here, right? So to me, is the very important, the discourse, to pay attention to words. Very important, how we say it, right? So how we refer to things, what evidence we have to say what we are saying, right? Not repeating things, right? By assuming we know about, right? So I think in every question you find the answer, right? So it depends how you question.
Yes, and on that note, thank you everyone so much for joining in. This conversation is so important. I feel like I'm being fueled by this. And the overall theme is that we're going to keep investigating to figure out how we can use our differences to elevate each other. And so I'd like to say thank you, Anna and Lauren, for dropping knowledge, dropping some gems on us. I've taken so many notes, and thank you for everyone for staying tuned. I know we went over time again, but it's so well worth it. I apologize again, Aaron, but it was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. And please come back next Thursday. We have another panel, same time, same place. And so I hope I will see you there.
you.
Thank you
Thanks for
again,
having me, guys.
everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And join us again next week for the new policies of dance. So, whole new topic.
Ooh,
Thank you very much.
great.
Thanks a
Bye.
lot, everyone.